Hello everybody, welcome to ChinFat. This is the third part in doing color grading that I'm teaching on this specific project here. We showed you in our first episode on this series how to use the color scopes, the Lumetri color scopes. Then we moved over to the panel and showed you guys how to use the panel controls. Now this episode we're going to start showing you how to actually do the color grade on a project here. Now there's some footage that we've used for the exercise files here is a very flat footage. It's very intentionally done. We did that intentionally, so it would have a higher dynamic range and you could have control over the entire grade. And it helps you kind of show what you can do with a color grade here. What I first recommend doing is because when you color grade, you're going to be color grading every single shot, but you don't have to repeat yourself on the shots that you've already done in the past. Like here, we've got, for example, we've got a wide shot, kind of a long shot. Then we cut to a medium shot. I guess a little bit more of a close-up, getting the close-up range there. Then over the shoulder, back to that medium shot close-up there, that medium close, and back to a full shot here, near a full shot as it moves across the room. But this shot here is the same as this shot here. So the grade for this is likely going to work if we just grade this one and then move that grade over to this one here. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to move through this project here. I'm going to do markers here. You got to be careful because right now we are under the color arrangement. If you hit M for marker, it'll put a marker on what the selected clips. If you don't have it selected, it'll put it on the timeline. I'm going to put it on the timeline rather. I'm going to put it kind of like right in the middle of this clip. Deselect the shot. In fact, I'm just going to, actually, before I do that, I'm going to move to editing so it stops selecting those shots for me, so it will just let me do the marker on the timeline rather than the clips. All right, so I'm going to say, all right, here's a wide shot that I'm going to color grade. I hit M, the letter M for marker. I'm going to move over this one. Here's a medium shot. I'm going to hit M for marker. I'm going to move over this one over the shoulder, and then we go back to this medium shot. So this one I don't have to grade again. So far we've got 3 shots we're going to work on. She stands up. This is pretty much the same as as this one over here, so I probably don't have to, so I might not have to work on this one. We have a shot out the window. That's a whole new setup there. Her coming back in, sitting down. These we've already kind of done. We've done that shot. We've done this one. This one's a new one. This is more of a close-up, a full close-up here. So I'm going to hit M for there. So far I've got 5 shots total that I got to grade. Out the window, this one is similar to this one, but a little different, so maybe I'll do that one as an individual grade, but we'll see. We'll get there. And we've done that shot. We've got one for that shot. Over the shoulder we've got, and then this is a new shot here, so marker, 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 and then the rest of these is the same shot now that we've seen and the same shot here. So my point being is you don't have to grade every single individual shot. You can grade a handful of shots and then copy and paste those effects to other clips that are basically the same setup, but you're cutting to different timing on those shots there. So I've got those marked there, the ones that I'm going to be working on. First of all, let's work on this wide shot. Now I'm going to go to color, arrange for color. I'm going to bring up my RGB parade. So I've got my three favorite scopes, my waveform, my vector scope, and my parade here. And we're going to start working on luminance first. The way I like to work on luminance, then I like to work on saturation, then I like to work on color balance. And with this one, actually, just so we can see it better, I'm going to turn off the parade and the vector scope just so we can see our luminance levels. So right now, this is a very flat shot, so I'm going to go into basic correction. Sometimes I will even go under the shot that I'm working on and do this and kill the saturation completely. So all I'm looking at is the luminance of the channel, and I'm not even worried about the color. So right now our exposure is dim. It's looking kind of, I don't know, for a darker scene it might be fine. I'm going to just bring up the exposure just a little bit, which will also give us some contrast range here. When we grab our contrast, we'll have a higher range for contrast, because if it's toward the bottom, see if this is like really close to the bottom and you start doing contrast, that's going to hit the bottom. It's going to bottom out sooner. So I'm going to increase the exposure just a little bit and grab my contrast slider and slide the contrast and give this image a little bit of contrast. All right, to give this even a little more contrast, I'm going to go to the darks here. I'm going to define the darks, the bottom level. I'm going to get them close to 0, so it really kind of defines them as dark. Especially in a scary movie, you want to probably do this a little bit more. Get close to 0, but not quite to 0. Let's see how we do on the highlights. We could bring the highlights maybe down a little bit and boost up the exposure a little bit, so we can kind of keep things nice and dark, and increase the exposure a little bit so we can kind of keep things nice and dark. Let's bring down the whites. Bring down the whites, which is the tippy top of the scale, and then increase the exposure here. All right, let's bring our saturation back here. If you double click on it, it brings it back to the neutral area there. And let's look at our before and after here. There's a before, there's our after. It's looking good. See, I'd say I kind of like this a little bit darker though. I'd say I like this a little bit darker though, just maybe right about there. So you're going to kind of use a balance between, so you're going to kind of, and if we're looking through an image, we go through here, she is kind of showing up, her skin tones and everything is kind of showing up around like 30 to 40 IRE. And midtones is the midtone gray. So actually for skin tones and whatnot, that's pretty good. We might even want to darken the shadows just a little bit, just to give the more of the creepy vibe. There we go. Let's say I like that level right there. All right, so next, I'm going to work on my vector scope here and look at our image. And look at our vector scope. Holy crap, this thing is really oversaturated to the yellows right there. And it's probably just mostly this, it's probably this light there that's really bleeding off into the yellows there. So what we can do here is I can probably decrease the saturation just a little bit until the colors everywhere else start looking kind of normal. See, because even the blues look a little oversaturated and the red, so I'm going to bring that in. So this is kind of like, generally speaking, about 1/3 of the way out, but we still have that light to work with. So now I'm going to go to my curves. All right, so under my curves here, I've got hue versus saturation. I'm going to try to bring down this big push in saturation. I'm guessing it's kind of that light that's causing that. So I'm going to grab my eyedropper and go up here and click right in the middle of the light. And that did tend to choose a little bit of the kind of orange yellowish range. Let's pull this down and see. And that nailed it. Look at that. It's bringing down the saturation. I don't want to kill that warmth altogether, but I want to find out it's a little bit more to the right in the yellows here. I'm going to push that down right there. Open this up so it feathers off a little bit more, and right there. And now we can keep that warm. That light is warm, but it's not glowing yellow. So watch this before as I uncheck this. So it's got that glowing yellow, it's oversaturated, and now that just kind of backed it off a little bit. So our saturation's looking pretty good. Let's look at our balance here. And right now this says my overall image is giving a way heavier push in the reds and a little bit more push in the greens than it is the blues. So our shot, and right now our shot, maybe it looks too warm, especially for being a nighttime scene. So I'm going to go under basic correction here. See if we can kind of fix this in basic correction. I'm going to push this more toward the blues, which will bring down the reds just in a subtle manner. And then the greens, let's bring those up and meet the reds a little bit and see what we get. And that's looking better there. That's not looking so warm. Before it was looking kind of like right about there. But now I'm just pushing it off just to cool it off just a little bit. And I like that a little more. I'm going to bring down the darks just a little bit just to kind of define the dark areas over here. It is crushing it a little bit, but this is like a darker movie, so it's okay to kill some of the details. Usually you don't want to be touching zero if you want to preserve details, but that's working there, and we could even cool it off just a little bit more. About right there. Now it looks like more nighttime light coming in, like nighttime moonlight coming in. There. Cool, I'm liking that shot there. Yeah, let's look at the before and after here. Let's look at the before and after here. Let's turn off that Lumetri color panel, and let's look at the before and after. That's before, that's after, huge difference. And let's say that's going to be my base shot that I'm going for right there. So when we're comparing things, I'm going to keep comparing things to this first shot, because that's the shot that I want to finish, that I want to use as my modeling shot there. So I'm going to go to, so everything matches from here on out. I'm going to go to my color wheels. I'm going to go to my creative tab. I'm going to grab my sharpen, and I'm going to just sharpen this image up a little bit because it's a little bit soft. Not from focus, just kind of the pixels are a little bit soft. Let me do undo, and I can see a slight sharpening of the image right there, and I like that. So just sharpen it up a little bit, and now we're going to move on to the next shot. Okay, so we got it where I like to. I kind of balanced. I got my darks, highlights, contrast, fixed, saturation, and then the color balance. And I'm going to do the same here. So I'm going to go waveform. If you're working on a bigger screen, you're working on 2 monitors, you won't have to keep turning the scopes on and off. I keep doing it just so you can kind of see what we're doing here. So basic correction, increase the exposure a little bit so we have a higher contrast range. Fix our drag our contrast over. See, if we're not getting enough contrast in this image, we can go to our curves, our basic curves, and do a luminance S curve here. There we go. I like that contrast. Let's increase our exposure a little bit. Right about there. Okay, we can go to color wheels and match, and I'm going to just use this for the comparison view. Click on the comparison view, and I'm going to turn this one to the first shot here. And we can get our playhead and scroll it in there because the beginning of the shot is fading in. So we can put these side by side and compare them. This is it has way more warmth than this does to it. So I'm going to first of all use my scopes here. Let's turn the R. And by the way, I've got my comparison view right here, so you can turn this on and off quickly rather than having to go to the color wheels and match. If this is not showing here, you can go to your plus button, your button editor, and you can grab your comparison view, which is right here, and drag and drop it down here. And hit OK, and now it's there. Now you can have a quick little switch there to turn it on and off, which is helpful. Let's look at our saturation. Saturation seems to be intact. It's not terribly oversaturated, so I might tone it down just a little bit. And then our balance, I seem to remember the other shot had a balance that looked more bluish. We ended up with more of a bluish shot. We ended up with more of a bluish shot than we did the red shot. And this one is pushing more in the reds and greens. So once again, I'm going to cool that off a little bit, push up the blues, bring down the greens there. The greens seem to be a little high. There we go. Let's do a comparison shot, see how they look. This one's looking more contrasty, so I'm going to drag the blacks, drag them down to kind of match the blacks. There. Bring down the shadows. Let's see, mess with the shadows a little bit. Exposure up a little bit more. There we go. Okay, so I'm liking that. I'm matching, but the skin tones don't seem to match here for here. So what I can do here is I'm just going to go under my curves here. I'm going to go to hue versus hue. I'm going to select a certain hue and change it to another hue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this eyedropper here. Let's turn off the comparison view for now. And I'm going to select the skin tone right on her forehead as a big obvious skin tone area right there. And I added that skin tone region, which is kind of in the reds here. Sorry, I should say skin tone as much as skin hue. Skin tone is the darkness level of the skin, but right now the color hue is a little reddish. So I'm going to grab this and I'm going to drag it a little bit more. Let's go up more toward the reds and down a little bit more, and that's more towards the greens. And then we can just push this up maybe a little bit. Just get a little bit more red, and let's see what we got there as a difference. And see, by pushing that up, we just got a little bit of that kind of glowy red out of it. Now it looks a little bit more natural there, just by slightly changing the hue there in her face. There's before. Actually, that's got a little more greenish in it, I should say. Now that adds a little more red and kind of offsets the green in her face. And we're getting more of a regular skin tone there. If you want to get really nitpicky with skin tones, I'll show you when we get to the close-up here what we're going to do. But now I'm going to move from shot to shot, and I'm going to keep doing this sort of grading here. I'm going to fix the darkness levels, the contrast, define the darks. If you got highlights that are hitting 100, you'll want to bring them down below 100. You want to work on saturation, the general color balance, and then you'll do the fine nitpicks with curves and or secondary colors. I'm going to show you one here close-up that I'm going to do a little trick with here. So here's my other close-up. Here's my close-up, my more full close-up rather than that kind of medium close-up that we were dealing with there. I'm going to bring this up on the comparison viewer here. Actually, let's do our basic grade before we start comparing. I'm going to go to basic color correction. This looks a lot brighter than the other images. I'm going to bring it down. Actually, let's see if contrast will bring that down a little bit. See, and that's darkening everything else up a little bit, but it still seems a little too dark, so I'm going to bring that down. Maybe the shadows bring down a little bit, and exposure up a little bit to keep that exposure on her face. Let's see how that looks on our Luma waveform. I'm going to go to vector scope now and look at the saturation. Saturation's looking pretty normal, maybe a little push toward the yellow, which might be coming from this blanket right here. So we could kill the saturation just a little bit, or if we want to kill them specifically in those yellows, we can go to our curves, get our eyedropper, see if it's the blanket that's doing it. And it looks like it is in the yellows there that it's kind of doing it, yellow towards the reds. And let's look at our vector scope as we do this, as we try to pull back that specific yellow color right here. It's kind of specking off toward yellow. So let's drag that down. And that doesn't seem to be getting, we need to move it over to the right just a little bit and make this range move over to toward the right. There we go. Now we're getting that spiky yellow and we're bringing it down so it's not such a yellow glow. Okay, let's bring up our comparison view. And I'm going to compare this actually to our, go from edit to edit up here, right there. And I'm going to scroll a little bit to where she's looking. Right there. Now look at the bluish hue that we have to this. We got to go to basic correction, blue this up a little bit, go down to the blacks and darken our darks in this image here. Get the contrast, but look at the skin tone not matching there. What we could do, there's two things we could try here. Let's go to color wheels and match, and I'm going to do face detection. I'm going to do apply match, and see what that gives us. That got it closer. That's great. It actually decreased the highlights. It shifted the midtones towards the reds and the highlights. But now, so the overall tone of the image looks good. However, what we want to do is kind of match skin tone now, or skin hue now. So let's go to our HSL secondary. I'm going to show you a way of kind of really honing in on the skin tone there. What I'm going to do up here is under Lumetri, I've got this one Lumetri panel that's been added to this clip. We're going to add another one. Actually, I'm going to rename the one I've used first. I'm just going to call this one base grade. So that's everything I've done on this base grade there. Everything I've done on the basic correction and so on. I'm going to go down and say add Lumetri color effect, and we're going to call this one, now it's got two on there, I'm going to call this one, rename it skin tone. We're going to work specifically on skin tone. So this has nothing done to it yet on the second one. That's the first base grade right there, but I'm going to do this on skin tone on its own layer here, and we're going to go under HSL secondary. First of all, I'm going to turn off my comparison view. So we're just looking at this one. I'm going to choose my eyedropper here and click it right in the middle of our forehead where it's really hitting the kind of the skin tones there. I can hit plus here. I can choose some of the darks as well. It chooses a wider range. And now let's go to color gray and show a mask of everything that we've selected and everything that we have. Everything that's in this white, everything that's in this white right there is stuff that we have not selected. But everything in color is everything that's in color right now is everything that we're going to be changing. We go color black, it shows everything in black that's not being affected and everything in color that we are affecting, and then black and white shows everything in white that is what we're going to be changing. So we want to kind of decrease that. I want to decrease my saturation a little bit so it's not grabbing the walls as much. And the saturation, we just want to kind of get as much as the face as possible and not the walls. Change the feather on these here. And I'll show you another thing we can do to really just kind of hone in on the facial features, on the face skin tone. Because look at the blanket that's kind of sharing skin tone colors with this. All right, once you get that to where you've adjusted this, where we've got as much as the face selected as you can, I'm going to denoise this a little bit. And then I'm going to also blur the matte, just soften it up a little bit. And we're going to turn this back to color gray here. There we go. Now we're getting a little bit more face. Okay, so this line here is also commonly known as your skin tone line. It's actually not technically your skin tone line, but the skin tone happens to line up with it. Can't remember. It's called the I- line, and I can't remember what the mathematical reference is behind that. But right now, actually, the skin tone's looking pretty good. It's going maybe a little off towards the red, so we could shift this a little bit. And watch as we shift this skin here a little off to the yellow, so it's more centered. Right there, we just slightly pushed it to the left a little bit, and let's see what we get when we turn that off, and let's look at our before and after. Let's turn this off. It just tends to bring a little kind of that blotchy nature out of it. That seems maybe a little too magenta, so. But especially if your skin tones, if you're having trouble with your skin tones and they're pushed more off to the red like this, or they're pushed more off to the yellow, you can grab your hue here, your hue wheel, and adjust that and push it off more so it's kind of centered there on that skin tone line there. Now, when it comes to skin tone, when once again I keep saying skin tone, but skin tone is referencing the darkness level of the skin, either if it's bright or dark, because everybody happens to have kind of a similar skin hue. It happens to fall right along this line right here. In fact, let's demonstrate that. All right, I've imported a few images here from the interwebs. One of them is our former president, Barack Obama, and depending on when you're watching this, our former or our present president, Donald J. Trump. And then I've brought someone in with some darker skin tone here so we can kind of demonstrate the hue of each person's skin here, that we're talking about tone, darkness levels, not color so much. Which is kind of interesting. So I'm going to go to, first of all, let's go to Obama here, and I'm going to create a mask, a opacity mask, and we're just going to put it on a portion of the skin here and show you the color range, the skin tone line, where that should kind of be at. Let's just grab a portion of the skin right there. Okay, and I'm going to go to Trump, and I'm going to do the same right there, and then go to this image here and do the same and show you kind of these differences in skin tone versus skin hue. All right, so we've got kind of three different portions of skin here that we're looking at. Let's go to our vector scope and take a look at these. All right, so Obama, first of all, look at where this hits here. And like I mentioned, the skin, I know I keep calling it skin tone, and I shouldn't be calling it that, but the skin hue is leading off toward the red and the yellow here, right on the line. It happens to be right on the line. Usually, this one is probably a little bit improperly balanced, color balanced. Usually, you're going to get just a little to the right of the red is where you usually get that. So let's take a look at the next one. And this one actually is a little to the right of the red, even maybe a little too much to the red. If it's pointing straight toward the red, that's too much. It should just barely be offset, just barely on the right-hand side of this line. So that's a little too far over, but now let's go over to the next one and look at the same. Even though we got darker skin, this is still a very reddish skin hue. People have a reddish skin hue because you have a little something called blood flowing under your skin, and it emanates a red color off of everybody's skin. You just have different levels of darkness and lightness skin, and that is actually skin tone. To correct it, that skin tone is actually the darkness levels in the skin, while hue, everybody kind of shares the same hue. So yeah, you can use that line to kind of correct your skin tones, get it exactly where you need it, and that one looks like it needs to be. And we push that off a little bit more towards the reds, and we'll get a little bit more color in there. Turn that off, and there you go. Okay, so I'm going to use kind of this first frame here, and use that to match everything else. Or I can even use this one here. And I'm going to do the same over the shoulder. I'm going to go through and correct all these, kind of using the same steps that I've used. And then I'm going to show you, after I get each one of these ones color graded and matching pretty good, then I'm going to come back and show you the rest of the steps here. Okay, so I've gone through each one of these where I put the marker on these different kind of setups, and I've graded each one of those, and I've tried to match them to kind of meet this the look of this first image here. I've been using that as a comparison, and sometimes the close-ups of medium shots as comparisons. But now what we can do is this is where it gets kind of easy. So I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 shots is all I've had to really grade. So I'm going to go to this first shot here. I'm going to go to Effect Controls, and I've only got one Lumetri color under there. I'm going to select that, and I'm going to do Control-C to copy, and then I'm going to move down my timeline and find everywhere where I have one of those shots. Right there's a wide shot. Now all I have to do is Control-V or Command-V. By the way, when I was on this clip here, I selected the Lumetri color. I do Control or Command-C to copy. Then move down to the next one. Right here's the wide shot. Command or Control V as in Victor to paste, and it pastes that color, and I'm done. I might have to do some basic controls here or some basic adjustments just because she moves through it. This is it moves into different lighting, and maybe we need to darken this up a little bit or something. But that looks pretty good there. So now I'm going to go to the next wide shot here. Let's find it. This is the next one right here because as she moves around and turns around, this is the same shot. Let's paste this, paste it there. And once again, this might need to be a little darker because she's closer to the window, which is fine. Then I'm going to move to the next shot. That's the wide shot right there. Command V to paste it. Keep moving down. There's another wide shot. Command V to paste. And one more right there. So now I've pasted that on like 4 or 5 different times. It cut back to that shot there. So that first one's done. Let's go to the next one. This is the wider close-up shot. So with this selected, I'm going to select the Lumetri color panel that is on this clip. Command C or Control C to copy. Move down. There's another shot right there, the medium close. Paste it. Looks good. There's another shot of it. Paste it, and I'm going to keep doing that and pasting all those shots that belong to that one, and so on. Now I'm going to do the same to this, and basically I just have to keep doing that. Let's show you the one actually where I had 2 Lumetri color effects applied to it. Was on this one. This is the actual tighter close-up here, the full close-up here. So I'm going to actually look at this. I've got 2 Lumetri. I've got the base grade and the skin tone. I'm going to select both of these right here. I did 2 layers on that, so I'm going to select both of those. And the way you can do that is by selecting the first one, holding down Command or Control, and selecting the next one. Control C to copy. Shift 3 to go to my timeline. Arrow down, arrow down, arrow down. There's the other close-up there. Command V to paste, as in Victor. Paste. That's done. And let's see if there's any other close-ups. That's it. So I've only got a couple other shots I need to do that to now. The over the shoulder there. So let's copy that one. Command C. See if there's any other over the shoulder shots. I think there was one other. There it is. That looks good. Then we have the outside shots. So I'll copy the outside shots, paste those. And this is the only other time she sticks her head out, so paste that on. And then we just have the end 2 shots. This one, copy the Lumetri, arrow down, paste it here, copy this one, paste it here, and I am done. So then it goes really quickly. After you get just those base grades done on those main shots, then it starts getting easier. You just start pasting. But then what you really need to do is you need to play through your project and just see make sure everything matches as it goes from shot to shot to shot, and see if there's any fine-tune adjustments you need to do to get everything to look good. And I would say just watch all the way through it, and if you see some spots where you need to stop, just stop, adjust it, and then move on to the next shot. Okay. Finally, one more thing that we can do here. I don't know if it needs it on this project necessarily, but it will on some projects. But what you can do, a little trick here, if you want to give an overall look to your shot, you can do this. You can go down to your project window here. I'm going to go down to the bottom of my project window here, this little new item icon. I'm going to say New Adjustment Layer. I'm going to hit OK. It'll base it on the resolution and your frame rate. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to grab that adjustment layer. I'm going to drop it over basically everything. My entire project here. Aside from the titles, I wouldn't need it on the titles. In fact, this title, let's zoom up here. fades completely out, so let's not put it over the title, because the title's black and white. That works just fine. But you could put this over your entire project if you want to. I'm just putting it over the storytelling portion. And if you select that adjustment layer, you can go up to the Lumetri color panel, go to Creative, and you can start going through some looks here and see if there's something you want to do to kind of give your image a very specific look. I kind of like that one right there. Keep in mind this is going to be kind of extreme when I click on it. When I click on it, it's very intense. It comes across very intense. So all you have to do now is grab your intensity slider and just adjust it down till you get somewhere kind of in between. So now look at this, and that gives that whole grade to my entire project now. It gives that to the entire project here. And I might want to, I could even go into basic correction, just turn up the exposure just a teeny bit. And that's just all adjusting on my adjustment layer here. Maybe kill the intensity a little bit more. And there we go. So now when I turn my adjustment layer off, it just gives that kind of little look to it, that little contrasty, kind of coolish look to it. And it does it to the entire movie. Well, that's only if you want to give your entire movie kind of that overall look. You can put it on the entire movie, and it maintains the grades below it, but then it puts this over the top of it. It's kind of like putting a color layer over the whole thing that you've already graded. Not necessary, but sometimes it's kind of nice just to give your entire project a nice look. And if you mess with the intensity slider, you can kind of turn it on and off and get it exactly where you want to. Well, cool. Well, that concludes the tutorial series on this specific short film here, editing the short film, doing sound mix, doing the titles, doing the effect work on it, doing the color grading. If you have any questions, please post them. In the future, I am going to be getting into more basic tutorials on just like how to do effect controls, how to do animation, I'll go into more details on credits and things like that. But for now, that's it. So I appreciate you watching. If you have any questions or comments, please post them.